Welcome, everybody. Thank you for attending today for our latest health and wellbeing event. We've had fantastic numbers signed up for this, so I'm assuming you're all here to hear what the other speakers have got to say, so I'm going to keep my introduction as short as possible. The topic is employee wellbeing during COVID and beyond, as we said in the invite. It goes without saying, it's been a really tough year for most people and for business leaders and HR people. I know from dealing with lots of HR people, it's been a very tough year. And looking after our employees whilst dedicating the time needed to ensure that our businesses survive and come through this has been really tough. But as we know, if you're on this, you're interested in wellbeing issues, it's absolutely vital that we look after our employees through this, as they really are our businesses. And they've all had to deal with a huge number of issues, both inside and outside of work, huge different types of anxieties that people have really struggled with over the last 12 months. And the world has changed, and it's going to continue to change. And I think a lot of the changes we've seen, some will reverse a bit, some may not reverse at all. I think we've seen some things that have happened the last year that are now going to become the new normal, if I can use that phrase. So we felt it'd be really good to talk to three different employers, three different sort of sizes and sectors, to get a feel for how the year has been, what they've had to deal with, how they've dealt with it, and what they see as the issues coming along the road and what their plans are to deal with them. So it's quite a lot to fit in. So as I say, I'm gonna stop talking in a moment. And so I'm gonna let them introduce their businesses in a moment, but we've got Jaya Sample of Home Group, Louise Williams of Hitachi Rail, and Alison Roder of Isoclad. And thank you again. I know I've already said this, but thank you again for taking the time to join us today. And as usual, alongside me, there's Hamish Moore of Wellbeing Works and Mark Philpott of MPH Group. Together, we created and run this health and wellbeing group. There is the usual Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So we're going to run through some questions I've got for the panelists. It will take us roughly 45-50 minutes, and then we've got a bit of time at the end to pick up any questions that you've got. So as I said, that's all I wanted to say. I want to crack on and hear some of the great things that our panelists have been up to in the last 12 months. So I'm just going to start by asking them to introduce themselves. So if Jai, if I could start with you, if you could just introduce your business and how COVID impacted you at the beginning.
Absolutely, thanks Jamie. So afternoon everyone, I work for Home Group, and for those who aren't familiar with the organisation, we're one of the UK's largest housing associations. We provide not only general needs housing, health and social care, we work really closely with the NHS, and we even build our own homes, so we're quite a diverse organisation. We've got in circa just over 2,800 colleagues, and we operate up and down the UK. And we have job roles ranging from back office support, housing managers, maintenance roles, development, clinical roles. We've got a small contact centre as well, and also our frontline support workers. My role in the company is the HR manager, and I lead a team of 7 HR business partners who are predominantly responsible for managing the day-to-day employee relations, HR people plans, and key strategic projects. And I also lead on all things diversity, inclusion and wellbeing for the whole of the organisation. And I guess that's really where my passion lies. So it's been brilliant to be invited along today. I guess for us as an organisation, when the pandemic hit us, like everybody, we had to mobilise really quickly in terms of, how we could be able to work from home. We were quite fortunate because most of our back office functions already had the required kit, so the Surface Pro, to be able to sort of hit the ground really quickly. But within 48 hours, we had to mobilise, so all of our contact centre workers, those who had the day-to-day interactions with our customers, to be able to set up and work from home as well. And I guess one of the major challenges for us has been the support that we've needed to provide to our frontline roles. These are the colleagues who are either supporting customers in one of our services or actually in their own homes. So things such as you can imagine, PPE, the risk assessments, COVID guidelines and the like, we really had to mobilise quite quickly and pull all of that together and communicate it. We also never furloughed anybody. So those who had to shield and were unable to either work in one of our services or customers' homes, we launched a Let's Do It campaign, and that's where we populated activity, nothing fancy, it was a spreadsheet, with activity that could be perhaps carried out whilst people work from home. So like most people, incredibly busy over the last, how many months we're into now? 15 months, is it? And counting.
I feel I feel stressed and tired just listening to how much you've had to do. It's such a diverse range of employees and potential issues, and I know we're going to come on to some of the things you've done in a moment. Louise, can I ask you to do the same, just introduce yourself and the business and your starting point on this journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. I work for Hitachi Rail. We're a train manufacturer based in Newton Aycliffe, so we build and test the trains on site. We've got around about 800 employees on site. That's sort of about 80% of them are our typical sort of manufacturing, warehouse, test people, and the other 20% are sort of office based, which is your engineering and corporate functions. My role, I've been with the company for around about 5 years now. I am in sort of a generalist HR role, supporting the business. I'd say I'm sort of 50% HR, and the other 50% I support the health and wellbeing strategy across the business. So again, obviously really passionate about this topic. And how COVID's impacted us as a business in the beginning. We were stood down for a couple of weeks. While we got the COVID secure measures on site implemented. So that's all the sort of health and safety measures that lots of businesses did. And then we slowly brought people back to site, but we did remain operational throughout the whole time.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Louise. So we'll come to some of your examples in a moment. Finally, Alison, obviously you're very different to the two people that have just gone before you. Introduce your business and how your starting point may be slightly different.
Yeah, afternoon everybody. So unlike Home Group and Hitachi Rail, we're a bit smaller. So Isoclad is based in North Shields. We're a composite panel manufacturer. We've got 50 staff, so quite a big difference from the others, which probably have some different challenges, I'm guessing. My role within is HR. I seem to have acquired health and safety along the way somewhere in the 18 months I've been here. But as well as focusing on the safety, we're also focusing on the health as well as a staff. The type of staff we have here, obviously being a manufacturing business, we've got lots of factory operatives. What challenge that brings is we couldn't do the working from home for those members of staff. We do have about 20 office staff and 2 external sales. Those obviously were able to work from home. So yeah, I think the biggest challenge was at the very beginning. For us, it was trying to keep on top of the ever-changing guidelines from the government. That for us was a massive challenge, because one minute you think you were getting set up for something and then it would change and you're having to revert back to something else. So I think for us that was a massive at the very start. Now not so much. But at the very beginning, yeah, that was a tough one, even for 50 staff. So I can't imagine what that must have been like. 2,800 and 800 employees.
I think we can all sympathise with having to adapt to the government changing its direction on things over the last 12 months. That's been difficult. Okay, so it's great to have that background. If we now move on just to sort of get into some of the details, some of the things that you've done to tackle the issues that have come up, and I know you've all done some great things. So could you run us through the highlights? I'll come to you first, Louise. If you could run us through sort of a summary of the things you've done and maybe pick out a couple of things that you think have had the biggest impact.
Yeah. So we've always sent out wellbeing bulletins on a monthly basis. We've always sort of ran campaigns across site, but over the last year we've really sort of upped the amount of support that we're trying to promote regularly to people, because obviously the pandemic's had a huge impact, we know, on everybody's mental health. So I think the things that we've really done is sort of really promoting that support that's available. We've really focused on making sure that people are aware of our mental health first aiders as well. Our managers are already very good at directing people through to them, but we've made sure that they've got a space on our Wellbeing page now, which is actually, we moved it over to our learning management system, which gave everybody access from home, because a lot of our people don't have laptops, they're not office based. So we moved everything over onto the learning management system, which means that they could actually access everything from the mobile from home, which was really helpful with all of the support information out there. We put links on there through to different support services available. And I think probably our two biggest successes have been a couple of campaigns that we ran. We ran World Mental Health Day last October, and we also supported the Marathon. So World Mental Health Day, we sort of created a workshop which focused on reducing the stigma associated with mental health, and also really encouraged people to open up and talk about mental health and recognise that actually it affects all of us. And we had a couple of senior leaders who came along and spoke at those events, and it was actually really, really powerful. So we haven't done anything like that before. We haven't ever had somebody in quite a very senior position come and talk so openly about their own challenges, and it was really powerful. So we had one gentleman who came along and talked about the loss of a friend to suicide. He was extremely open about it around his own battles, and we had a gentleman who talked about his daughter who's autistic and their own family struggles and how it sort of impacted them. And particularly with the gentleman with the daughter who's autistic, he comes in the office and he's very happy, jovial, you know, you wouldn't know anything was going on behind closed doors. And actually it made people really sit up and realise and think, you don't know what's happening outside of work. And I got a lot of feedback from people to say, you know, I've actually gone and phoned my friend I haven't spoken to in a while, and, you know, I'm going to make sure I phone my relative now because I don't know what's going on in their life and I need to be a bit more connected with them. So we got some absolutely great feedback from those sessions that we delivered. And then the second highlight for us, I think, was the Marathon as well, and that was in July last year. We partnered with the Samaritans to raise awareness of all the great work that they do and help raise money as well. And this was a virtual event, obviously, and it was to challenge people to run or walk 26 miles in the month. So everybody sort of set up their own challenge. They might have run a marathon every week, but we created a leaderboard that everyone had access to, so people could go on there and they were sort of cheering each other along, and you know, you could see the miles totting up and the donations totting up as well. So it's a really good team event, and it was run across all of our different sites across the UK, and it was a great team event, sort of pulling everybody together. And you know, there's a really good community spirit, and I think people felt like they could actually give a little bit back in a time where some of us probably felt, you know, quite helpless really. And it got some of us into some great habits as well around walking and losing weight, and you know, there were some really good stories that came out of it. So again, I think, yeah, those two were some really, really positive campaigns that we ran.
Great, thanks. I mean, some great examples there, and I think that sort of getting that team spirit is vital. Different in different businesses, but yeah, business particularly where people are remote as well, it's vital to keep that going. And the example you give there of people sharing their experiences, I think the more that happens, the more these issues are going to be dealt with, and it's going to be much more on the agenda. And Jaiva, I can come to you now. I know you've had some of those like sharing of stories and real life experiences, and your brilliant conversations as well. So if you could run through your sort of summary and pick out those highlights, but if you could touch on those couple of topics, that'd be great as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Jamie. And I think this was one of the questions that I perhaps struggled a little bit with, because there's so much that I could say, in all honesty, and probably quite similar to Louise, where we've always been, you know, championed well-being across the organisation, but I guess this pandemic has thrown that right to the forefront for everybody. So whilst as an organisation we've always really strongly encouraged that flexible way of working, I think the last sort of year we've really encouraged colleagues to work flexibly and take advantage of that, whether that's being, you know, all the issues we've had with homeschooling, caring responsibilities, and I guess the general fatigue of being on constant digital calls or meetings. So I think that's been a real key for us, and I think colleagues have really liked that genuine approach as well, where it's okay if you want to log in and work 7 till 9, take a couple of hours off and then join back on. It's about the outputs rather than the hours that you're working. Similar to Louise as well, we do have mental health first aiders within the organisation, and with this year, you know, we all know mental health is being heightened as well. So we've launched what we call a mental health support tool, and I guess in essence that's just pulling together all the useful resources that managers and colleagues can tap into. So it includes things like race, ethnicity and mental health information, something called, it's an in-house product called Being Me at Home Passport, and that's basically just a template where colleagues can disclose what conditions they might have, so they don't have to continually explain to managers, or if they move around managers, in terms of what support they need and what their condition, how it affects them, etc. Also, my wellbeing plan and my stress support plans recently been launched as well, with external links in that mental health toolkit to external support as well. With our mental health first aiders, we're actually going to refresh the offer to colleagues just to raise the awareness that we do have mental health first aiders, and we have circa just under 400 as a cohort, and we've launched a bit of it, I wouldn't call it a job description, but almost a role profile, so colleagues can really understand what is the role of an MHFA and how can they support that individual. We've also launched an evaluation form, because we found that whilst we had circa 400 mental health first aiders, we weren't really sure if it was touching the mark that it needed to. We didn't really review anything, so we've developed an evaluation form so that we can report on a quarterly basis, and also set up purely focused on the mental health first aiders themselves quarterly meetings, so that we can sort of check in terms of the best practice, understand what their needs are, and also support them from a wellbeing as well. And like you mentioned, Jamie, quite a lot of promotion of key wellbeing events, and our colleagues within Home Group really like to hear sort of role models and stories from colleagues themselves. So similar to Louise about opening up people's eyes to say you don't really know what people are going through, and it's just really encouraged people to open up and share their own experiences. So for example, last month it was endometriosis awareness. So we did a huge spread on we use a platform and we shared, in fact I shared one of my personal stories and how it had impacted me on a mental health perspective, and we must have had around about 250 comments, people saying thank you so much for sharing, I didn't really know a lot about my partner, so listening a little bit more, like I understand what it is and how some conditions affect people from a mental health perspective as well. So it was really insightful. But one of the things from this that we've the two things. The Wellbeing conference, which ran in January, and that was so powerful. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now. You're breaking up. I don't. Was it just me, or was everyone else having the same problem? Okay, I'm getting some. Try again, Jai, and let's see if it sounds better now.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me now? Or?
Yeah, it's breaking up a little.
I'll put myself mute and then
I may just get. I'll give it a second and see if it sorts out. I'll move on, and maybe you can finish that when we move to the next question. Just see if it sorts itself out.
You can still hear me.
I'll move. Alison, do you want to add your story and the type of things you've been looking at, and we'll come back to Jaira in a moment.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, I've been listening to everything they've said. I don't think we're as far advanced as that. I've got some great ideas.
I'm not sure if anybody.
But from ISACLA's point of view, I think for us it was more about making sure people felt safe on site. I remember the first day COVID hit, and we had quite a few people come in and refuse to come into the office. For whatever reason that was, some for personal reasons, due to vulnerable people at home, etc. So it was about overcoming those hurdles for us as well. We're more, because of the size of our organisation, we're more about getting to know our individuals, each one, because we're able to do that. So understand some of those personal issues, i.e., you know, the vulnerable people at home, whether that be parents or children. So for us, like I mentioned, keeping people safe was our biggest hurdle. So we chose the decision to do testing for all our staff on a regular basis. That was one of our biggest incentives that we wanted to do. Once speaking to people, you know, we offered life coaches and things like that. You know, we have people that are aware of mental health on site, but we're not qualified to deliver that ourselves. So we get people in touch with those. Again, with it being a small organisation, we've had a couple of people uptake that, but not huge amounts. For us, you know, for people just wanting to come into work, feel that they were safe doing so and not taking anything home was quite a big thing for them. And as well, as I mentioned to you before, because we didn't have the luxury of people being able to work from home, our work didn't dry up. We still had things to produce. We still had to function as a business. So we had to do things that enabled to do that in a health and a safe working environment. So I've listened to all these things on mental health, and it's great, and I wish we could do more of that right now. It's really a really valuable tool to have.
Well, I mean, that's the purpose of this type of event, because businesses of different sizes will have different budgets and resources, and everyone's at different points of their journey. So you'll be very similar to lots of other businesses of your size, Alison. So I mean, that's why we're tackling it in this way. We'll try. I'm going to go to Mark in a second, and we'll come back and try and see if Jai's technical issues are sort of. If I look distracted for a moment there as well, great mum. My son was locked out and started knocking on the window just as I was trying to do this, not realizing I'm presenting on a call. So that was a fun moment as well. Mark mentioned testing there. Can you just for a couple of minutes? And obviously it's a big part of what you're involved in your business. Just a couple of minutes on what you're seeing businesses do around testing at work at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jamie, and great to see so many people on the call. So, from a very high level point of view, in relation to testing in particular, we've all been on a journey, and the regulations are changing so rapidly, almost by the hour, it seems to me. No sooner do you have a policy in place to address certain things, then the government introduces something else that we've all got to respond to. So we as a business have just been trying to kind of move with everybody and look at how people are responding, and trying to sort of offer a various sort of plate of options to try and enable people to move through this pandemic over the last 12 months. And the types of things we've seen people doing, and Alison touched on them, you know, many have been getting into regular testing on a weekly basis or 2 weekly basis, just to kind of help, you know, seek out asymptomatic cases and understand what that means to the work population in preventing infection in the workplace. A lot of people have been using testing to try and build confidence around welfare and mental health, agendas, just to give people the confidence that they can come back to work, having been off for such a long period of time, which is a massive deal in the early stages, and is becoming increasingly relevant now as we come out of lockdown and more businesses start to open up. I think people have been starting to really kind of focus in on infection control. I don't know about you guys, but having been back to the leisure centre recently, I've never seen public facilities so clean in my life, which is amazing, because businesses are starting to wake up to the fact that actually infection control in the workplace is really important, and there are lots of things we can do to help people keep feeling safe and clean and secure in that regard. I think technology has become a really useful part of what people are doing. Everybody's become much more aware of how to use data to look at health and well-being in the workplace, and how to report on that data within and between departments. And I think that's going to become an increasing feature as we move forward post-pandemic, when people get into a much broader health and well-being agenda. How do we use data to inform what's happening in the workplace? I think foreign travel is becoming really topical. So more and more people are certainly getting in touch with us because of our links with providing services to Newcastle Airport and Leeds Airport, with understanding what people need to be doing around traveling and border control and the impact of that when employees go on holiday and then come back and have to be in quarantine for certain periods of time. And do you have to have a test to release? Do you not? And all these sort of questions that are going around looking after border control issues. So that's going to become very topical in the next few months, and I'm sure some of the larger businesses will be facing that issue and looking at how to enable people to travel for work purposes, but without it impacting the business. I think there's a shift that I'm starting to see away from antigen testing towards antibody testing as a welfare issue, to start to help inform employees about what levels of antibody people have, and there's more products coming to the market that are helping to inform that agenda. So that's one to watch. And then I think the last point I'd probably make in a whistle-stop tour is I'm definitely seeing a movement towards people looking forward towards the flu season and trying to understand what's going to happen around flu versus or alongside COVID, and how they're going to enable home working more in the future. Do they have to have everybody coming back to work? Can we enable businesses to work more from home? And then as part of that, whether it's at work or at home, what can we do as part of the preventative health screening work? And how do you start to get a profile of employees in the workplace and what their personal risks are to perhaps, even contracting COVID in the future? Because what's become apparent over the last 12 months is what, the risk factors that are actually at play with COVID, and businesses are starting to kind of wake up to the fact that there's a lot they can do to look after health and well-being to prevent the risk of COVID becoming a permanent feature. So I hope that helps, Jamie, but that's
great.
Tour of some high-level points for you.
No, thank you, Mark. That's really, really interesting. Jaya, can we hear you now? Let's have a try.
Can you hear me?
I can, yeah. So you're going to leave the video off and just see if that helps.
I'm probably going to have to leave the video off. I'm sure that's not a bad thing for many of you, so I'll leave my video off.
That's fine, as long as we can hear what all the things you've got to say. That's great. So moving on with the questions, in my discussions with the panelists beforehand, a couple of key themes that came out of our discussions were communication and engagement. So start with you first, Jai. What have you done to create that effective communication and engagement, and what advice would you give to the audience about getting that right, particularly in the current environment?
Yeah, certainly, Jamie. I think I mentioned, and hopefully you all heard this on one of the responses earlier, how we use a platform called Workplace, which is run by Facebook. So we created a specific COVID group on that Workplace, where we channeled all of the sort of necessary, important information relating to anything COVID. And it goes back to what a few of the other guest speakers, the constant churn of changes from the guidelines from the government, etc. Because obviously we have frontline colleagues. So it was a one-stop shop. Colleagues knew where to go to get that most up-to-date information. We also, in terms of engagement with colleagues, we do an annual Great Place to Work survey, but we also did 2 Pulse Wellbeing surveys last year, just I guess so we could really understand how colleagues were actually truly feeling, what their views were of the support that we had put in place, but also what else could we do to support them further. Obviously, we analysed the outcomes of that and reported to our executive senior leader just to get that buy-in and that support for any actions that might have fallen out from that. We also introduced something called Wellbeing Brilliant Conversations, and we made those mandatory. And we've done 2 rounds of those up to now. We called one of them the Winter Wellbeing Conversations, and they were a huge hit both with managers and colleagues. And I guess that's from the perspective, especially for managers, almost having some structure to that wellbeing discussion. So it was purely a full hour, and these were mandatory, where the colleague and manager just focused on the wellbeing. So it would ask questions like, you and your wellbeing, how are you feeling? How are you coping with things? You and work, what's the workload like? Is it manageable? Are you able to fit that in around any other responsibilities that you might have? Then it would talk about you and your home life. How's that affected, the pandemic affected others in your household, and how might that impact you? and then also making sure that colleagues knew where to go to find the most up-to-date information, were they making sure that they were keeping themselves up to date with that, and then also to capture any actions that they might have agreed as part of that conversation. Again, like the pulse surveys, we did analyse those and report that up to our exec and senior leaders, and then developed any initiatives that we felt might have supported further. We also launched something called the CEO's Weekly Comms, which is sent out by an email, but also a posted video on Workplace, because not everybody has access to, if they're out and about, so we just make sure that people can access it on their Surface Pros or their mobiles to watch the video. And that really was just a roundup of all of the important things that had happened during the previous week and what was coming up in the forthcoming week, and giving links to important documents or important posts that might have went on Workplace, because you can imagine plethora of information on those platforms, sometimes you miss things, and that has been so powerful. And we've had so much feedback to say, please don't stop these communications on a weekly basis. We absolutely love them. It pulls everything together, much to our CEO's delight. He loves doing these brilliant videos and emails. And I guess probably my advice would be to keep colleagues in the loop. It's about being open and transparent. I guess as humans, we like to be kept up to date. And I think by not communicating, it just causes the rumour mill to go in absolute overdrive. And from past experience, it's generally with the incorrect information, which in turn, it just heightens people's anxieties at a time when perhaps we need to sort of support people. And I know it sounds really simple, but I'll say it anyway. It's about just asking colleagues themselves how they'd like to be communicated with as well, because one size doesn't fit all. And sometimes we've had feedback where there's just too much information, which is why I feel the weekly comms just pulls everything together in sort of one place. So at people's leisure, they can grab a cuppa and read through, what have I missed? What do I need to sort of focus on and take the time to read?
Right, well, thank you. I mean, you're right. It doesn't have to be complicated, does it? And asking people what they want is a sensible standpoint. And I love the Wellbeing Brilliant Conversations. I think making that mandatory so that there's no inconsistencies depending on your manager is fantastic. Yeah. Louise, if I ask you the same question, so what's your approach been on communication and engagement?
Yeah, for us, it's been about having that really consistent approach. As Jai was saying, we don't want the rumour mill starting because it easily spreads throughout the factory quite quickly. So as we were focusing really on looking at sort of preempting changes that were coming, having that consistent approach and being open with colleagues and sort of welcoming any feedback. So when I was saying we're sort of preempting changes, for example, where the schools were going to be closing and we knew that time was coming, we'd go out and talk to our people who have got children at home who are going to come across some struggles with childcare, probably becoming very anxious around it, and talk to them and say, look, what's it going to mean for you? What support are you going to need? Do we need to flex your hours? So they were ready, knowing exactly how they were going to work when the children were going to be at home as well, and trying to alleviate that stress for people and saying, yeah, we know this is a stressful time and, come and talk to us. And then obviously, because we've got so many people on site as well, and not many people with access to laptops, our managers would get, bombarded with questions daily. And to try and maintain, getting the consistent messaging out there, we'd create Q&As on a regular basis. And again, we try and preempt anything that was coming. So, for example, when the vaccine programme rollout was coming, we know people would be asking things like, what time can I have off to get my vaccine? What if it's in the middle of the day? What if I don't want the vaccine? Do I have to tell you? So we'd sort of preempt all those questions that we knew colleagues would be asking and wanting to know, and publish those so everyone had the same information throughout. And we do that on a regular basis as much as we needed to. And the other thing that we found really useful to make sure we had that consistent approach was we created flowcharts. So every scenario you could think of around, I've got symptoms, my partner's got symptoms, my child's sent home from school, have I been in close contact? We'd have a flowchart for each of those so they could simply look at it, and work out, right, I need to isolate, how long for, And it was just really helpful. Everyone was, you know, able to access those documents all on the same page, and, you know, same information going out to everybody. And then around just having an open communication, we welcomed, you know, questions and suggestions throughout, and we still do. You know, it is a very open culture. We do want people to come in, you know, if there's any suggestions people have got around changes we can make on site, or any questions we haven't thought about, then by all means we welcome those freely, and feedback to the whole company as well. And then similar to Jaya as well, we'd send out text messages to people with regular updates as well. You know, it might have been a government announcement, like we were saying, that, you know, things change very quickly, and actually do we need to get information out to people quickly? So yeah, text messages were really useful and continue to be really useful for us.
Great, thanks Louise. Some really good, really fantastic examples in there. Alison, obviously much smaller business, and when we had the chat, yours has almost been on a more personal sort of basis. You talk us through sort of your engagement and communication.
Yeah, it has, but I do want Louisa's flowcharts what people do, because after 18 months you still don't know. But absolutely, so ours is more face-to-face, when it being so small. I mean, for things we've done face-to-face, you know, testing day for us is my captive audience, because I have to sit with them while they wait for the results. So during that time, you get to find out so much. You know, they ask questions that they perhaps wouldn't ask normally, because it's just me and them, or they think they're being a bit cheeky by asking certain things. But, you know, just being, that you've already touched on, being transparent with them, you know. And also I think for me is letting them know that you're human too, and you have concerns and worries and anxieties just like they do. I think one of the biggest things I probably took out of a lot of my conversations with people is things that you think are trivial are really big to some people, that you might have overlooked because it doesn't mean anything to you. But by speaking to your people, you know, it can just mean so much that you've thought about them, and you've made them feel for a minute that you've listened. Yeah, it's, with that being that smaller group, I do enjoy that about it. You do get to understand people a bit more intimately, I suppose, than you would normally. You know, we do toolbox talks, which I know is not something anybody's mentioned. I think it's a manufacturing thing, because I've never heard of it before. But that's basically just educating people on, at the very start, especially about COVID. You know, what are the rules? But you know, I think somebody mentioned as well, just keeping in touch with people, especially when they were furloughed. That was a massive thing for us. We only furloughed half our workforce, but just phoning them on a regular basis to check they were okay. You know, I think they really appreciated that. So not as many things as the others, but yeah, it's still lots of work for one person, I think. I think
there's a lot of great sort of themes from this, in terms of how, as we probably all know, that communication and engagement, particularly good communication, is absolutely vital. And yes, there were things, I think that the people who've done great things in communication during the last year will reap the rewards of that. But that doesn't mean we can't all, even if we haven't done all of those things, be learning the lessons from that and improving communication going forward. Just a very quick question to each of you, in terms of the things you've done. Yeah, how is it being received by the workforce? What type of reaction have you had from them? Louise, can I come to you first on that one?
Yeah, sure. I think we've had a really good response overall. I think people felt really safe and informed throughout. We carried out our employee opinion survey last September, and we received over 80% positive feedback on how the company had responded to COVID, which I think is an amazing achievement. You know, testament to the amount of hard work that everybody's put into that. I think a lot of it, like I said, is down to sort of that consistent messaging, and you know, I think that's instilled confidence in our people. That message has been clear. The company's sort of, you know, keep them informed all the way through. So I really think that's helped, you know, build the confidence with the workforce. Similarly, right at the beginning of the pandemic as well, obviously lots of people had health concerns. They were worried about themselves, worried about others that they might have been living with. And we responded to all of those concerns by, arranging an occupational health appointment so they could speak to a medical professional, talk about what the concerns were. And I think that really helped as well. So they knew that they were being listened to, and, some recommendations and adjustments came out of that as well, which is fine. We implemented those. So it really did help to put people's minds at ease as well. Right. The sort of only challenging point that we've had, and I say challenging point, it's the point that's probably been brought up quite regularly, is around car share. And Alison, I know when we spoke previously, you've had a similar issue as well, so I know you probably touched on that. We've said as a business we weren't going to allow car share for sort of obvious reasons, but we implemented a process where people could be in a bubble with someone as long as they're a single person, and it was a bubble inside and outside of home. So we tried to sort of try and support people in some way. But I think, the car share has been a regular topic with us, and I think it's just sort of highlighted to us that some things people are very accepting of, and others actually car share is for a convenience for some people, but actually it's probably had quite a huge impact on other people and the sort of monthly take-home salary they've got at the end of the month. That's probably been one of the challenges for us, but it's about keeping people safe as well, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's sort of the type of thing that's come up a couple of times, of understanding what are the issues for each person, and for that person it's a really issue, and getting to the bottom of that. I'm conscious of time, because the last question is about the future, but Alison, can you just a quick comment on that, and I'll ask Jaya quickly, and then we'll move on to what you see the future holds.
Yeah, I think for us, we've had positive feedback. Staff feel safe. They turn up to work every day. They're happy to be in work. There's no complaints about anything about not being in work. So for me, I take that as a real positive. Just quickly, I mean, the management team here has only been in 18 months, which is really the length of time of COVID. So for us, they've gone through a whole culture change too at the same time. So they're not used to being as open as what they are being. So I take that as a positive as well.
Right. And Jaya, just from you, the sort of reaction you've had from staff, I think you've touched on some of it already, but just if you want to add anything on that.
Yeah, I think probably one word to capture that would be overwhelming. To be fair, very grateful. I know it sounds really simple, but colleagues have just commented how they feel that they've been really well looked after, but more importantly, Home Group genuinely cares about them. And our Great Place to Work survey as well, the wellbeing comments were just continue to do what you're doing. We want more of the same, please.
Well, that probably segues quite nicely into the last question there, but in terms of more of the same, what we're looking at what you've got planned for the future. So in terms of, I'll start with you, Alison, in terms of the challenges ahead coming out of lockdown, sort of general anxiety levels of staff, etc. What have you started to think about the possible problems, issues ahead, and planning to deal with some of those?
Yeah, we've had a thing, I think for us, I mean, I know we've spoke previously, and it's hard because we don't do the working from home. The only thing that's changed is people are more spaced out, or they have a mask on. I think where the anxiety will come is when you start taking away those bits of comfort blankets, when all of a sudden you're not being tested all the time, and all of a sudden you're allowed to take your mask off. People probably feel vulnerable. I think that's the biggest thing that will be. I know for myself, that's probably going to be the biggest one. Our working will not change because we've had to adapt. Yes, we've got new ways of working, but I think those will continue past COVID, because they work. There's nothing wrong with being extra cleanly, is there? I mean, It's going to do no harm. Everybody carries a sanitizer. We'll carry on doing those things. They're not going to do any harm. So for us, I think it's a vulnerability, I think will be the biggest, but that will feed back to all these great things that people are doing about communicating and just listening to what people have to say. The business is growing, so we might have more staff. That's going to be probably another biggest hurdle for us, incorporating more people into that environment.
Great. Okay. And Louise, your sort of thoughts for the future problems and how you might deal with them?
Yeah, so we've started looking at the roadmap out of COVID, started having discussions around that. And we're looking similar to the government on a bit of a staged approach. As Alison said, some things are going to stay the same. We've all got in great habits with sanitisation, and we've got desk screens, which I think they're probably here to stay as well. But we're looking at a sort of staged approach and possibly talking about staying one step behind the national coming out of lockdown as well, a national guidance, just to see you know, if there is a spike in cases, how that's going to affect us, and do we push things back a bit. But you know, I do think, like Alison was saying as well, there are going to be different levels of anxiety. You know, we've all had these rules to live by for over a year, which have been very, very difficult, but we've all known what we can and can't do. And when things start getting lifted and, you know, maybe it becomes a little bit grey with people, you know, some people will still want to, you know, have that social distancing. Some people will still want to wear the mask. And how do we balance that as a business? You know, how do we make sure that people are still feeling comfortable and safe? And actually saying to our workforce, you know, you have to be appreciative that everybody's on a different journey with this. And, you know, some people are happy to be coming out of lockdown. I think we all are happy, but, you know, happy to be coming out of lockdown, but others are going to have a lot of anxieties around it. And we've all got to be respectful of that and manage it and support people through that.
I absolutely agree. I think that's going to be one of the key issues. And I suppose we haven't really started on that yet, so no one's really got the answers, but maybe through and we can maybe share some experiences when people do start down that road. And finally, Jai, what your thoughts for the future and how you might tackle some of the issues ahead?
Jamie, probably very similar to both what Alison and Louisa said. I think for us, there's probably three key things, and that's how we use our office spaces moving forward. And like the others, we're looking at our ways of working principles. So even just basic things in terms of how we use that office space, what's our new meeting etiquette around start and finish times. You know, challenge yourself to always have to be a full hour, not scheduling back to back so that we avoid that digital fatigue, meeting avoidance hours so colleagues can sort of have that focused time on doing the do. Also, how do we support colleagues who have been sort of permanently working from home, transition back into an office, however much that looks like, whether it's 20% of the time, 40% of the time. And with that, we go back to our brilliant conversations, and we'll be rolling out some mandatory returning to home groups way of work and brilliant conversations, just so we can capture that and focus on how colleagues are feeling, what anxiety levels they have, how we can support that, etc. And then the final one is about how we really do keep that momentum with some of the fantastic progress that we have made personally as an organisation with our wellbeing, and how we keep that going. So it's all about sort of the wellbeing digital activity, because I think it's allowed us to have that far wider reach, rather than just sort of setting up conferences where people have to travel. There's a cost element, commercial element to that as well.
Great, thank you so much. Well, that's the end of the questions I had. I'm going to just check what questions we've got that have come through. If anyone's got any more questions, please fire them through. Whilst I'm just doing that, Hamish, while I'm having a look at the question list, you just want to give your thoughts on what you've seen dealing with businesses, and possibly pick up on a couple of the things that have been said today for a few minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Good afternoon, everybody. And can I just say, firstly, how impressive those three versions of the approach to this have been. Much of this is exemplary stuff from what I'm seeing across the UK. And if I might just start, Jamie, with a couple of observations first, and then some sort of parallels and differences to what I'm seeing. I mean, I think it's really fascinating that if you go back to when the Wellbeing at Work agenda started, which was really 2008, Carol Black published her national report. It's taken all this time, and now in a very short period of time, you know, something like 15 months, it's really moved to the top of the agenda. So those 12 years prior to it have really been compressed into 15 months. And I think what we've heard is how the role of senior HR people has changed. It was interesting, I thought, to say, well, I started in HR and I somehow acquired health and safety on the way. And you know, and all credit to you, Alison. You know, you've run with it. But interestingly now, how it's so embedded, and that's a picture that we're seeing across the UK. That the significance and importance of it has now become a much more strategic item. I think the other thing that I picked up in the presentations was how the shift has occurred in terms of the focus on the needs of the staff as being preeminent, rather than the needs of the business, recognizing that without matching the needs of the staff to whatever corporate objective you've got, you haven't got a business. And that balance between the focus of where we were and where we are has even permeated into how we refer to staff, where increasingly people talk about colleagues rather than about staff or workers. And I think that's another subtle change. And if you listen to each of our presenters today, they all made that very, very explicit. I think the third theme that I'm seeing across the UK is the increasing importance of our expectations of what we think our managers should do and are able to do. And I thought it was fascinating, you know, where you've introduced a compulsory 1-hour wellbeing chat. And that is something quite innovative. I've seen lots of them, but that's the first compulsory, and all credit to you. But that poses quite a lot of challenge for managers. And what I hear in other places is there's a degree of fearfulness about how will I cope with some of the stuff that's presented to me? Am I trained and skilled to do that? I think the incremental approach that each of the presentations have identified is what is really working well, particularly if there's explicit validation by very senior managers. And I really like the examples, the two examples that were given. And that increasingly seems to validate much of the intervention. So encouraging very senior people to give their story brings the thing to life. The Facebook page that's unique to Home Group, there's been some of that, but that's a really good one. And I'm increasingly seeing CEOs doing weekly video briefs. And interestingly, you know, they're not spending hours and hours and hours perfecting these so they're some sort of marvelous Hollywood standard film. They're pieced to camera, you know, in an office or at home, and it's from the heart, and that seems to be working well. Two other observations. Surveys on wellbeing, getting the views of people, your 80% feedback, extraordinary figures for staff surveys. You know, very corporate places will often get higher. I'm sure Ward Hadaway would get a much higher figure, Jamie. But 80% feedback is pretty good. And increasingly, we're seeing people wanting to collect data on that. The flow charts, wonderful. Could we share those, or the idea? That sounds a really good one to me. And I think probably the last thing is people are struggling with planning for the future. That people are having difficulty with, you know, what are our priorities and how do we handle some of these uncertainties? But my observation overall is that these were fantastic examples, all credit to the presenters. And I think people have got an enormous amount from today.
Great, thanks. There's some good questions come through. Well, there's one here around on that topic of sharing stories. There's a question: how do you find those internal role models and people who are willing to do that? Do you approach people or ask them to volunteer? Louise and Jai, that came up in both yours. If you could comment on that.
Yeah,
I think James.
Oh, God, Jai, you go first. Then
Sorry there. I think Jamie goes back to exactly what you've just said. It's a mix of both. So we obviously look at what wellbeing initiatives are coming up over sort of 3-month period, and then we link them with our colleague forums. So put out posts on Workplace to say we're looking to promote this initiative. Would some people like to get involved and help shape that up? And once we hear back from colleagues, we sort of take it from there and it rolls forward. But it gets so much noise on our platforms, whether that's senior leaders or the frontline colleagues. People just love real lived experiences that they can actually relate to as well. Absolutely. It's been so powerful.
And Louise, is that similar for you?
I just approached the senior leadership team directly. I managed to get 15 minutes with them all to present on the wellbeing strategy going forward over the next year. So I just asked them, you know, who would like to be involved in campaigns going forward, and if anyone would want to share the stories. And, you know, we had a few people come forward and really keen to get involved.
I would also probably just add as well, Jamie, it picks up from what Hamish has just said. I think sometimes these key messages that come across, but almost from the heart. So it's not a perfected video, it's not a perfected story. And I think that's where people can relate. Because similarly, we had one of our exec directors, it was Stress Awareness Month, and we asked him to do a video about how he copes with everyday stresses that we all have, and he brought a little bit of humour to this and did a little. His daughter videoed him out in the garden doing keep me ups and things like that, and his Newcastle absolutely brilliant. And we must have had about 200 odd comments on the post, and it just because it's see them as real people and not just our senior leaders, which I think is very important.
Great, fantastic. And a question here is about how did you get feedback from staff following some of the events you've done? What ways are you doing that? Do you want to take that, Jai, first?
Yeah, I think for us, when we do sort of the digital wellbeing activities, we can gather in the moment feedback, because it tends to go at the end of the Teams call. People put some comments in the chat, and then we also do a little quick survey. I know people sort of roll their eyes and yawn when we talk about survey monkeys, but they can be so powerful as long as they're really succinct. Top 3 questions, that's all you need, and then hit it at the right time to sort of send it out and ask for that feedback. Are we hitting the mark?
Great. Louise, have you got anything you'd like to add on that?
We do gather feedback through sort of pulse surveys that we've done. I love Jaya, you know, getting that instant feedback. That's absolutely great, and that's something we are trying to sort of implement on our wellbeing page that we've got, because it's crucial information that you're getting back from people, isn't it? And making sure you are really hitting the mark. So yeah, I'm going to do more of that in future.
Okay. I've a question here. Has anyone had any difficulty in bringing employees back from furlough, for those that have used the furlough scheme, and how did you manage this to sort of balance employee welfare? So those discussions with people and sort of integrating them back into the workforce if they've been off a while and dealing with any anxieties. Anyone sort of experienced that, and any tips? Alison, have you've got?
I think for us, yeah, I mean, when I was speaking to the people when they were on furlough, they were all desperate to come back to work. I think they were all bored after about 4 weeks. They thought it was great to start with, the weather was nice, etc. But then after about 4 weeks, most of them were desperate to come back to work. I think the only place we have struggled is we had a member of staff whose partner was pregnant and he wouldn't come into the office. We had that as a challenge. It's took us a good 9 months to deal with that through to its finale, and he's now back. But if anybody wants information on what we do, I'm happy to share that separately. But yeah, from furlough, everybody was desperate to come back to work.
So, Jai, have you got something to add?
Well, yeah, we didn't, as I mentioned at the beginning, we never furloughed. But we did have exactly what Alison's just said, some challenges when the government, you know, shield and restrictions were stopped and people could go back to the workplace. We had a lot of people not wanting to. And I think for us, it was just having that open and frank discussion with the individual to understand, what are you concerned about? We reassured them that we're following all of the government guidelines and we're going over and above. There's safe, the services are safe, we've got adequate PPE, etc. And almost encourage them to perhaps, because bear in mind, some of them have been out of the work environment for some months, so we encourage them to come in and maybe just have a coffee and have a walk around the service, chat to their teammates, etc., and then do it on a phased return as well, and that really worked well.
Well, I'm conscious it's pretty much bang on 4 o'clock, and so I think I might wrap it up there. Just putting the speakers on the spot here. Actually, if people have got questions they think of afterwards, or something that you've said has struck a chord and would like to understand more, you happy for people to touch?
As long as it's not
great. I saw Louise nodding her head.
Yeah, that's fine.
Great, excellent. Because I think, there's so much I know from speaking to the panelists before this event, just to try and get an idea of the themes and topics. There's a lot that hasn't come out today. They've done huge amounts of things, and there's only so much we can get into an hour. And the real, as Hamish said, real fantastic examples of businesses really trying to do the right things by their employees and create great communication and cultures and engagement, and from that look after the well-being of their employees. So I just thank you again to all of you for participating today. It's a great value to businesses to hear these stories. Thank you as always, Hamish and Mark. Thank you all for joining us today, and please look out for our future health and wellbeing events. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.